Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
So, are you someone who's been, really carefully managing your cholesterol, maybe taking medication, watching your diet, but still feel like those numbers aren't quite where they should be? Or maybe there's high cholesterol in your family history and you're wondering what else can actually be done?
Right.
We've been looking into some really, I think, quite promising research that suggests managing that kind of stubborn high cholesterol, which is, a huge risk for heart health, might be about to get a significant boost.
That's right. And this deep dive, it really focuses on a new medication. It's called Obicetrapib. And there's a recent study that looked into how effective it is at lowering cholesterol, especially for people already at high risk of heart attack and stroke.
Exactly. And for this, we're drawing our information from a couple of places. A recent article in a health news outlet that flagged this research, and also the original, the full study published in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Right, the source paper.
Yeah. And our goal here is really to break down what this new drug could mean for you, or maybe someone you care about who's facing this particular challenge.
Okay, so maybe let's start with the basics just quickly. To understand why this research matters so much, we need to talk about cholesterol. We often hear about low-density lipoprotein cholesterol.
LDL, yeah. The bad cholesterol.
Exactly. That's the type that can, build up inside your artery walls, creates plaque, and really increases the risk of heart disease. But there's actually another player here, another type of fat in the blood called lipoprotein.
Lipoprotein, right, LPA. And that one's particularly tricky, isn't it? Because it's largely genetic.
That's the key issue. It's mostly determined by your genes, so it's much harder to lower just through diet and exercise, the usual things.
And it also contributes to that hardening of the arteries, atherosclerosis. And, well, historically, we haven't had many great tools, medication-wise, to specifically target it.
Precisely. And that leads to this problem where many people, even those already taking things like statins to lower their LDL cholesterol and, making all the right lifestyle choices, they still struggle.
They can't quite hit those target cholesterol levels.
Exactly. Especially if elevated lipoprotein is part of their picture. So this study, the BROADWAY study, it looks specifically at whether obicetrapib could give an extra benefit to these individuals.
Okay, so BROADWAY. It was set up to see how well obicetrapib worked and also how safe it was, specifically in patients who were already considered high risk for cardiovascular events.
Correct. It was a big study, multinational, and critically, it was randomized and placebo-controlled.
Meaning some people got the real drug, others got dummy pill, placebo.
Right. And neither they nor the researchers knew who got what initially. This lets you clearly see the actual effect of the drug itself, separate from anything else. They received it on top of their usual medications.
Okay. And who are the participants you said high risk?
Yeah, over 2,500 people. They either had diagnosed atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, so a history of heart attack, stroke, that kind of thing, due to plaque buildup.
Okay.
Or they had something called heterozygous familial hypercholesterolemia.
That's the inherited condition, right? Causes very high LDL from a young age.
Exactly.
Okay.
And importantly, all these participants, they were already taking the highest dose of other cholesterol-lowering drugs like statins that they could tolerate.
So we're really talking about people who needed more help despite current best efforts.
Precisely. People already treated, but still not at goal.
And were there specific cholesterol level requirements to get into the study?
Yes, there were. They needed low-density lipoprotein cholesterol levels of 100 milligrams per deciliter or higher. Or if it was between 55 and 100, they needed to have an additional cardiovascular risk factor.
Okay.
And the researchers also looked at non-high-density lipoprotein cholesterol levels, which is basically another measure of all the bad cholesterol types combined. Similar criteria there.
Got it. So once they were in the study, how is it structured? You said placebo-controlled.
Right. So they were randomly assigned in a 2-to-1 ratio. 2/3 of the participants got a 10 milligram dose of obicetrapib taken once a day.
Just a pill once a day?
Yep. And the other third got the placebo pill. All of this was in addition to the medications they were already on.
Okay. And how long did this go on for?
The researchers followed them for a full year, 365 days. But the primary analysis, the first main look at the results, was done after 84 days.
About 12 weeks, 3 months.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get to it. After those first 12 weeks, what did they find? What were the key results?
Well, the results for low-density lipoprotein cholesterol were pretty striking. The group taking obicetrapib saw a really significant reduction.
How significant?
The average decrease from their starting point was almost 30%. The paper quotes a least squares mean percent change of minus 29.9%.
Wow, okay. And the placebo group?
Interestingly, the placebo group actually saw a slight increase in their LDL cholesterol over that same time, about 2.7%.
Huh. So the difference between the groups
Was substantial, a difference of negative 32.6 percentage points between the obicetrapib and placebo groups. And statistically, that was highly significant. P-value less than 0.001 for those interested.
So for someone who's really struggling to get their LDL down further, even on statins, adding this drug could potentially drop it by nearly another third. That sounds like a big deal.
It could be very meaningful, yes. A potentially major step towards better heart health for those individuals.
And I remember the news reports making a point about its effect on that other factor, lipoprotein. What did they find there?
Yes. And this is perhaps one of the most exciting parts. The study showed obicetrapib didn't just lower the LDL, it also significantly reduced levels of lipoprotein.
Which we said is hard to treat.
Exactly. The news article highlighted an average reduction of 33.5% in LPA levels in the group getting obicetrapib.
33.5%. That's really notable, especially given the lack of options for LPA.
It's a major development, potentially.
Yeah.
Because, as we discussed, LPA is largely genetic, and we just haven't had many effective ways to lower it. So for people who felt kind of stuck with that inherited risk,
This offers a potential new strategy.
it really does.
Okay, a 33.5% drop in LPA alongside a nearly 30% drop in LDL. That's impressive. What about side effects? How well did people tolerate the medication?
That's always the crucial question, isn't it? Both the news piece and the research paper itself suggested it was generally well tolerated.
Okay.
The news report mentioned its safety profile looked similar to what they'd seen in earlier, maybe smaller, trials, and the actual study paper noted that the overall rate of adverse events, side effects, seemed pretty similar between the group getting obicetrapib and the group getting the placebo.
So no major safety flags raised in this initial 12-week period, at least compared to placebo?
It appears that way from these initial findings, yes.
That's definitely encouraging. The news article also quoted the lead investigator, Professor Stephen Nichols. What was his take on these results?
Yes. Professor Nichols, who's a prominent cardiologist and researcher, described the findings as an important step forward, specifically for those patients who are finding it hard to reach their cholesterol targets with the treatments we already have.
Okay.
He called obicetrapib a promising new option, precisely because it tackles both LDL cholesterol and lipoprotein.
The double benefit.
Exactly. And he also mentioned the practical side, the convenience of it being just a once-daily pill. That can make a big difference in whether patients actually stick with their treatment long-term.
Absolutely. Adherence is key. So putting this all together, assuming these results hold up over the full year and beyond, what are the bigger implications here? What could this mean for people at high risk?
Well, the potential for providing better protection against heart attacks and strokes seems quite significant, particularly for that group we've been talking about, the ones who just aren't getting to their goal cholesterol levels with current therapies alone.
Right.
And the ability to also lower lipoprotein, that really opens up a new avenue for addressing that inherited cardiovascular risk, which, as we've said, has been a major gap.
A gap that this might help fill?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Plus, you have the ease of use, adding one pill a day to an existing regimen. That simplicity could genuinely lead to better overall treatment success and adherence.
Okay. Now, we always need to be balanced. These results sound promising, but what about limitations? What caveats should we keep in mind?
That's a very important point. First off, while these 12-week results are exciting, we really do need to see the full data from the entire 365-day study.
To understand long-term effectiveness and safety.
Exactly. Does the effect last? Do any unexpected safety issues emerge over time? We need that longer-term picture.
Makes sense.
And also, remember who is in this study. These were individuals already identified as being at high cardiovascular risk, and they were already on the maximum tolerated doses of other lipid-lowering drugs.
Right.
So we need to be cautious about generalizing these results directly to, say, everyone with high cholesterol or people at lower risk or those not already on intensive therapy. The benefit might be different in other populations.
Good point. It was a specific high-risk group. And just to circle back on Professor Nichols, his role as the study lead, and his position at major heart research institutes, that adds weight to his interpretation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. As director of Monash University's Victorian Heart Institute and Monash Health's Victorian Heart Hospital, His perspective comes with a high level of expertise and insight into the potential clinical impact.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the main takeaway for you, our listener, from this deep dive into the Obicetrapib BROADWAY study. What's the bottom line here?
I think the key message is that Obicetrapib shows significant promise as an add-on therapy. For people who are at high risk of heart attacks and strokes, it effectively lowers both LDL cholesterol and that tricky-to-treat lipoprotein,
Offering a new tool.
offering a potential new tool, exactly, to boost cardiovascular protection, especially for those who haven't quite reached their treatment goals with the medications we've had available up to now.
Yeah, this research definitely sparks some interesting thoughts about the future. Considering these findings, what could cardiovascular risk management look like down the road? Could we see more combination therapies like this, targeting multiple risk factors, becoming standard practice for you, perhaps? What further questions does this raise for you personally about managing your own heart health or maybe the health of people you care about?
It certainly points towards a more personalized approach, potentially being able to tackle different facets of risk more effectively.
Definitely something to keep an eye on as more data comes out.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.